Dr. Terry Silkman here. I'm a health and nutrition expert, and I want to speak with you today about one other thing that I think can help you live in sixth gear to 60 years of age or beyond, and that's how to deal with poor air quality. Recently we talked about poor water quality and about how 50% of the world's drinking water is contaminated and unsafe for consumption, and how even the assumption that in a Western world country like the U.S. and or Europe, other places where you expect government agencies to take care of your water, how probably that's a somewhat cavalier assumption that that's going to happen. And certainly as far as air quality goes, probably there isn't anybody in any major city who feels really comfortable and safe that the quality of the air that they breathe is conducive to their longevity and their health. I live in Salt Lake City. We have actually some of the most incredible skiing, some of the most incredible mountain vistas, hiking, biking, camping areas that you would ever experience any place in the world. And yet, we also have the infamous distinction of having some of the poorest air quality on the North American continent. Many days out of the year we are cautioned to stay indoors, and yet there's plenty of evidence that the quality of the indoor air is actually worse than the quality of the outdoor air. We also, like a lot of areas in the western U.S. and possibly even areas where you live, we have concerns about radon gas. For those of you who don't know about what radon gas is, basically that is a product, it's a radioactive gas that comes from the breakdown of uranium in the soil. And so in particular in areas where houses are built above uranium-rich soils, that gas, when it is liberated, finds the path of least resistance to the surface. If that path of least resistance is a crack in your foundation, or it's through the concrete rather than around more substantial rock or soil around your house, well then you basically get concentrations of radon gas within your house. And it is the #1 cause of lung cancer in non-smoking individuals. So unfortunately, just a few miles away, in fact we lived there for many years when we first came to Salt Lake City, southeast Sandy, Utah has the highest degree of cancer incidence in the whole state of Utah. Probably partially due to radon gas, possibly due to some other things. But what I wanted to talk with you about today, and I don't have a product for you to deal with radon, but there are lots of radon mitigation agencies out there and companies that do ethical jobs. There is in Utah a website that you can go to. It's radon.utah.gov. And you can go on there and research, and they have a list of radon mitigation companies. They also have the opportunity for you to purchase a test. The test costs $9, only $9. That's the kit itself that gets mailed out to you, and that's the testing process when you send it back. So the research that's done in Utah and published in Utah is that if your radon test shows that you have more than 4 picocuries of radon in that test, you need a radon mitigation system. Unfortunately, many of the households in the Salt Lake Valley, and it's even worse in southwestern Utah, have household concentrations that exceed 10 to 15 picocurie. It's a no-brainer, guys. It's a $9 frickin' test. If you don't pay attention to anything else that I do, anybody who lives in a radon contamination area should get one. I guess just by way of kind of personal experience, you definitely do not want to try to live with lung disease, especially a lung disease that is terminal and that can't not be resolved. My grandpa was a Depression-era individual. He saw things and lived through things that most of us can't even hardly imagine. And unfortunately, he got lung disease late in his life. He was a smoker. He was involved in the Dust Bowl era of things, several other contributing factors. And that tough, hard as nails, worked till actually the day that he died, gentlemen, would have days where, especially with humidity or heat, that he could not get oxygen into his system. He was essentially suffocating. And to watch that tough, determined man who had overcome so much adversity, to see the fear in his eyes and hear the quake in his voice when essentially he was suffocating to death, basically couldn't get any oxygen, well, that was heartbreaking for just about anybody. All of us around him wished we could have taken that away from him. Don't be the person whose spouse or whose children or who becomes a casualty to lung cancer because you didn't look at a $9 test. Radon mitigation systems can be installed for as little as $1,500. I say little, for some of you that's a little bit of a budget breaker for a couple of months, but think about what happens when you get a disease like that. Think about what happens when you can't work anymore and how you provide for yourself and your family. Think about what happens with thousands of dollars a month of medical bills that your insurance company doesn't cover when you cannot work. Think about what that does. Sometimes the reason I do this is not that you cannot live with the poor health that you have, but it's unfortunately that you can live. Sometimes way longer than maybe you would like to live with the poor health conditions you have, and there's nothing you can do about it once you cross that line. So, this is Dr. Terry Silkman, trying to bring you information that will help you live in sixth gear to 60 and beyond. I hope you guys have had some really great information. Just one last thing. If you cannot afford some of the things we've talked about in terms of other air quality concerns, lots of viruses, particle matter, volatile chemicals that are in the air, there's lots of safe ways that you can help protect yourself from that. As I said, if you can't install an air filtration system into your home or your business because of the cost, well, we have 9 units that we have purchased individually that are room units. And I'm going to show you one just briefly. You can actually find it if you go to puritytoday.com. Hopefully this will show up. And basically this is one of the units that we have in our house.